Hey everyone, Nick here from Whole Latte Love. I've got Zach with me.
Hello everyone.
And welcome to our live stream. So if you're tuning in, today's topic is going to be pre-infusion. So we spent a lot of time on our channel talking about pre-infusion, flow rates, things like that. But in a lot of cases, we're looking at machines with E61 groups. And so as you can see behind us, we do have a lot of machines, including a few with E61 groups, but they're going to be in the minority today because we're going to be taking a look at how you can experience pre-infusion on machines from other manufacturers, in particular, a lot of those that don't have that particular group style.
Yeah, you'll see that each one of these pre-infusions act a little bit different on their definition.
Yes.
So we're going to also do some quick recommendations on how to maybe pull some shots. And a quick tip, it all has to do a lot with the puck preparation. It's going to more equate your success with different kinds of pre-infusion.
That's right. And so if you haven't already, if you enjoy our content, please make sure you like and subscribe to Whole Latte Love. We've got these live streams coming for you every Friday, and we've got comments down below. So if you ever see me checking down there, I'm just taking a look at your comments or questions. So we already have one from Jeff. So Jeff, thank you for joining us. And he's asking, regarding the Eco Brass boiler on the Profitec Move, where are the cons over a stainless steel boiler? So yeah, we have talked a little bit about this, but generally speaking, the choice by ECM Profitec to use stainless for certain machines for the boiler is the corrosion resistance or the resistance to like a patina or other kinds of kind of like tarnish forming. So I remember when I talked to Michael from ECM about this once, and he kind of reminded me of the Statue of Liberty, but basically he's like, yeah, you know, when you don't have a good vacuum relief valve in the machine and water is just kind of spraying on top of the boilers, if you don't have stainless and you don't have a treatment, you can get the green stuff. And when you have stainless, you don't have green stuff. So
yeah, and then there's also on the other hand, where if your water is too empty, you know, copper is a little more conductive, so it might have the ability to create some pitting.
Yeah, that's true.
But either way, honestly, you don't want to use too empty of water.
Stainless can be a little tougher to work with too. So the brass boiler that's in the Move is also the same one that's in the Go, which is also the same one that's in the ECM Casa 5. So when you're manufacturing and you've got compatible multiple parts, you can use those to basically help with, you know, streamlining production so that you can have a wide variety of models just like they do from ECM Profitec. So got one more question and then we'll get going. Where is the Bicoca in the team? Please talk about the pre-infusion for it. So 3Batty, we'll have to save the Bicoca for another time. I don't have one here and we do have a lot to cover today, but I'll definitely put that one in the bank.
Yeah, we're going to be trying our hardest not to blow a fuse today.
Yeah, so we have 7 machines up here, and yeah, I was already a little concerned about that. So we're going to start actually on my right with the Solus Barista Perfetta Plus. So Mark, if you want to take us over there. So the BPP is here as a representative of Solus, but it's also as a representative of this style of machine in general. So I would say thermoblock driven machines. So there are newer thermoblock style machines, if you want to come back to me, Mark, like the Fellow, the Espresso Series 1. So Zack is actually, he got to get some hands-on time with that. Oh, and Tate actually, I see, is asking some questions related to what I'm about to talk about. So yes, we were at the SCA show. Zack saw the Fellow Espresso Series 1. That does have variable flow rates, right, for extractions, which we'll get right back into on this. And Tate, the answer is yes. We will have Stone espresso machines here at Whole Latte Love.
Yeah.
So if you checked out our little discussion with Daniel from Rocket, you'll see that the Stone Light is the one that we'll be getting. It looks really, really cool. I'm very excited for it. And yeah, maybe Zach, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I mainly like the aesthetic of the Stone. I feel like it's pretty different aesthetically in comparison to a lot of the other machines here. And the manufacturer of it makes it pretty great quality too. With that focus
I mean, because it's like you've got ECM Profitec and now you sort of have Rocket Stone. So it's a similar situation where it's one company with multiple brands. For me personally, having worked, I mean, tomorrow is my 15-year anniversary here at Whole Latte Love, so thanks, Zach.
Mark over there
Mark,
clapping.
behind the cameras for us today.
I almost said laughing, but
but you know, machines have definitely evolved a lot over the years, right? And things like flow control, pre-infusion, PIDs, things like, you know, single dosing on grinders, grind by weight. There have been a huge infusion of new features, right, that have sort of I think really occupied a lot of people's thoughts when it comes to machines, but I always deem certain kinds of machines as what I'd call lifestyle machines. So you want to be able to have a machine at home, you want to make coffee. Maybe you're not looking to really dive into a hobby, but you still want to be able to brew at home, which is, in my opinion, infinitely better in most cases than what you'd get at the store. The Stone, their whole kind of ethos is like, we're redesigning the coffee space, right? And so I feel like this is one of the first machines where the actual shape and form factor of the machine was at the forefront of consideration, but also 10-minute heat up time because it has a cartridge heated group, incredibly compact, still steam pressure, super small machine though. Like, I think there's a lot to like about Stone. I am very excited about it.
Definitely.
Yeah, so anyways, Tate, glad to hear that you love it, for sure. The Stone lacks a shot timer and temp control, and again, 3-batty, that is kind of where I go back to things like it is more so what I would call a lifestyle machine. If you do wind up getting yourself a scale, for example, you can still get auto time and auto tare on things like the Varia Accu or the Accu Mini. But in a lot of cases, too, if you are making milk drinks consistently, some of the sort of more nuanced flavor of the coffee will be lost a little bit. And I think that that's where you go with maybe kind of more forgiving blend that's not going to lean as much into complexity. And yeah, so I mean, the Stone, I think, is going to have some people who are really on board, especially for the size and the form factor. But for others, I mean, there's already so many other machines, as we'll see here, that have incredibly precise temperature control. So for me, I think it just kind of comes down to like, what are you going to use it for?
Yeah, with the right grinder, I can kind of dial in on anything.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. So, but again, lots of machines for lots of different home baristas. We'll go back to our Solus though, and basically what I was saying is for many espresso machines that have thermoblock boilers like this one, they do have a sort of automated pre-infusion. And so basically just by pressing the brew button, oh, I was too slow. It just took a nap on me. There we go. Waking back up here. That's the nice thing about thermoblock machines though, they'll heat up super quickly. And so basically the idea though is that the pump will run and it's just going to dispense a little bit of water. And so I've done testing on this, and basically the amount dispensed is going to be about 15 grams, right? So it's not a whole lot, but it is just enough little bit of water to wet the top. We do have a smaller diameter here on it being 54. So Mark, if you want to switch back over, and I'll take the portafilter out of the group here. And so even then, if you noticed, because we had waited a little bit, if I run that pre-infusion again, we're going to see a lot more water come out. Because remember, a thermoblock is not like a traditional boiler. So it's not full of water all the time. So Mark, let's go back over to the Solus again. And when I press pre-infusion for the second time here, you'll see a lot more water flowed immediately the second time. And again, it's just because unlike some of the other machines that we're going to see up here, there's not a supply of water that's available. And so the thermoblock, because it's heating on demand, is basically just pushing water through and superheating it to make your espresso. So on something like the Solus, especially if you want to avoid a situation like that, because the boiler is still going to be hot when the machine is on, but it's not going to be, you know, as hot as it can be, you may eventually lose some of the water that's in there. So my recommendation, especially because the group isn't being actively heated, would be to run some hot water on first heat up through your portafilter so that you can guarantee that you're going to get the maximum amount of water out for your pre-infusion, as well as having the portafilter preheated. And so like I was saying, in my tests, I found that it was about 15 grams of liquid coming out, followed by a brief pause. So that, like I said, is sort of how you're going to see pre-infusion on a lot of different machines. I don't have them all up here, but pretty much any of those kind of thermoblock styles that aren't now like the new fellow Espresso Series 1 will pre-infuse, if they have pre-infusion, in a very similar fashion.
And the puck preparation with all of those are going to be pretty similar. Your tamp won't matter as much. It's seeing that equilibrium, that max resistance right away, and kind of pressing down all of your grounds immediately, which is a little bit different than to say and compare to some other things that we have up here. We would like to maybe change our puck preparation or put into a little more care into that. You might see a little bit of a different kind of extraction in comparison to something that starts with a lower flow or a slower drip when you're pre-wetting or pre-infusing your puck.
Exactly. So moving on from that, we're going to go to the Latte Elizabeth that we've got over here. So the Elizabeth, this is a dual boiler espresso machine, and it has volumetrics. So that's something that you're going to see on a handful of machines that we look at today. So the Solus actually has volumetric brewing or automatic brewing, and so does the Latte here. So on the Latte, actually, you have a single and double that have their own unique pre-infusion programming that you can do. And so basically we have Pre-Infusion 1 and Pre-Infusion 2. So the cool thing is basically you can set them individually, and what we're setting actually is the total amount of time that we want for this pre-infusion up to 20 seconds. So the thing is, when you start a brew cycle with either of these two buttons, what's going to happen, and I'll move the tray forward just slightly, is the pump runs initially and then stops. And so that pump's running just to make sure that we have water available to start coming out. And then the solenoid valve stays open for the remainder of the duration. So what you're really programming is that brief period of time before the extraction, or maybe not so brief if you're going for 15 seconds like I am, where the solenoid valve is open and you're letting water simply just drip onto the puck thanks to the pressure.
Yeah, it's going to continue to saturate. Also dependent on kind of the coffee that you're actually using as well.
That's
how
right.
porous it is, how much it can really saturate due to how dense it might be. Some light roasts may not want to saturate as easily as something like a dark roast, because during that roasting processes, the air is kind of making pores throughout all of our coffee.
Yeah.
And those grounds itself. So that porosity really allows it to kind of absorb a little bit more water, and that might be easier to kind of penetrate the whole entire puck during this pre-infusion.
Yeah. And so with the Latte, it is sort of addressing the potential issue that you may run into with any machine that is using some kind of pre-infusion that's taking water from the boiler without necessarily using a pump pressure, which is that in some cases, as we'll see on some E61 machines that we have here, you don't have much pressure left, so not a lot of water can actually flow. So it's actually pretty clever what they've done, where having the pump run first allows the machine to guarantee essentially that water is flowing, and then the solenoid valve just stays open.
Exactly. You hit that equilibrium to where we can get past like maybe that initial tamp, right? That initial pressure, and then start infusing with the whole entire coffee bed after that.
Yes, exactly. So pretty cool. And then what we'll do though too is we'll go in and just run through a whole extraction for you. But you can see there's quite a bit of water that's actually flowing through here, which is really nice. Right here we've got really big trays too, which I appreciate with the little cup riser. We're about to move on to the Sylvia Pro X, and the Sylvia Pro X is actually probably the simplest of these machines. Oh, sorry, Mark, you can get back in there. Simplest of these machines to explain because it has a feature called variable soft infusion, right? And so all these machines are doing a little bit of pre-infusion. Basically, though, the reason why I'm running this is just to show you, though, that if you look, our total time here was 38 seconds, okay? So when we go into our programming for shot 1, it's 38 seconds. So that pre-infusion time is actually calculated into our total extraction, right? So that 38 seconds that you see included the time for our pre-infusion as well.
Yeah.
So if you're wondering how do you program it on the Latte, you do want to consider that your pre-infusion is being added to the total time for that extraction.
And if you're trying to think too of like, oh, what am I supposed to keep track of? Am I trying to keep track of like everything all together or just one separate thing? I feel like it's sensible to keep track of one or the other or together. Specifically looking at pre-infusion, I think it's important to just look at that as a solitary thing.
Yeah, and I mean, you can tell me if you think differently, but I do feel too that if you're following a recipe just in terms of ratios, looking at your total coffee out and tasting that versus thinking too much about the time and whether or not you're adding the pre-infusion or not, can really, I think, is a better way of thinking about it if you're looking for your coffee to taste good as opposed to necessarily do the numbers make sense to me?
Yeah, definitely. So I think a lot of coffee professionals speak in a term of ratios. Now, when we're talking about a recipe as well, there would be a specific recipe that specifically talks about that pre-infusion time. So it's like what pressure and for how long, and then how long do we wait for that full saturation, depending on that coffee, because we're giving a recipe based off of density, and then we're given a ratio based off of taste.
Yes. And so Mark actually was just in a video that we put out. We have 2 new blends, our Basopolis and our Beaned Up. And I think, Mark, was it the Beaned Up that was like a 19-second extraction?
Yes.
Yes. So 19-second extraction, and that was like, I think, a 1 to 2.5 ratio. So, you know, like I said, it's not always about necessarily what the numbers say. It's about kind of your recipe and what you like in terms of taste.
Yeah, and there's more than one way to pull a shot, and you kind of go towards what
Are you
I know,
really?
it's kind of crazy. And it also depends on both the equipment that you have and maybe what you're specifically trying to go for. Each coffee really has all of these different complex aroma and taste compounds, so there's a couple different ways to pull it. As coffee professionals, we try to find the best possible way with the best equipment possible, but there's going to be a varying factor at home.
So we'll move on to our next machine here, which is the Rancilio Sylvia Pro X. So I will have the Lilith here take a little nap for me.
So we don't bust anything.
Exactly. And then we do have our classic GT up here as well, which you probably know by now how the pre-infusion works on that, but we'll be covering that again for you because it's doing something very unique compared to the rest of the machines that we have. But if we take a look at the Sylvia has a feature that Rancilio referred to as variable soft infusion. And so for a very brief period of time, there was a standard just Rancilio Sylvia Pro, and that was around for about maybe a year. And then through some experimentation, I'm pretty sure it was the guys over at Rancilio North America, they said, hey, you know, we could probably do a few more things with the programming to give the machine some more functionality. And that's where the variable soft infusion feature comes from. So got a couple things in here. How does the Bikoka control pre-infusion? So yeah, 3Batty, I will take some notes on that so that we can get back to you in the comments later, because I don't have that in front of me. Stelia, hello there. Hey, welcome. Thanks for joining us. So, yeah, the Sylvia Pro X, basically, if you want to get us back on the screen there, Mark, I'll try to keep my head out of the way for you. All we want to do is press and hold our plus and minus buttons, and then we can begin changing which functions we want. And so in particular, function 8, that's variable soft infusion. Now, it goes between 2 and 6 seconds. And I'll leave it on at 6 because that's the most easy to see here. But the way that this works actually is that the machine is going to simply open the solenoid valve and let water flow out, right? So the Lilith Elizabeth ran the pump first, then opened the solenoid valve. On the Sylvia Pro X, we are just going to see that the solenoid valve, we'll probably hear it first, opens and lets that water flow out. If you want to come back here, Mark. So and see, again, just like we saw with the Solus, that was the first extraction that we pulled. So we are going to want to simply run again. And now you'll notice, now we actually have water because the pump ran. We've got some water in the line. We're able to actually see some of that flowing out. So again, when you're first setting up these machines, that's something, like I said, with the Lilith Elizabeth that they actually address. By having that pump run first every time, you actually can guarantee that you have some water flowing. So I'm curious, what would be the best setting for pre-infusion on a Synchronica plumbed in? So that's a good question. We do have our Synchronica 2 up here. Probably want to get into that once we get over to the Synchronica 2, but just to get us ready, if you want to let us know, what kind of coffee are you pulling? What are you going for, just like a traditional espresso? Maybe you're making like a ristretto or something. Like, what are you trying to pull? And then maybe we can help you get dialed in.
Yeah, and your preferred roast type. So do you like light roast, dark roast? That will kind of give us more so of a recipe, a broad recipe to really kind of start with, and then we dial things back.
Yeah. So, but not really too much else to say about it on the Rancilio. My opinion, honestly, is I think for most cases I would leave it like 4 and above, just in terms of duration, because when you're around 2 or 3, in some cases, just very little water will actually leave the group. And it can be inconsistent just as a result of you may not have water that's already, ready to start flowing, right?
Exactly. So we can kind of see the natural difference between flows between each one of these. This is a very light flow. And when you have such a light flow, that infusion of the puck, making sure it's like completely wetted and ready for an actual extraction will, again, kind of highly depend on your puck preparation over here, whether or not it's actually going to infuse evenly. And this is actually the only time when I would actually say tamp pressure is kind of important. If we can kind of naturally think about that, I usually say, anywhere between 3 and 65 pounds of pressure. It doesn't really matter because that initial pressure that you actually see from the machine will kind of reach its equilibrium, and that's as tamped as it can be. Now, that's where the puck preparation and how evenly it can saturate through that immediate densely packed and immediate resistance from the puck will really matter. But when we're pre-saturating like that, nice and slow, we might be able to see some flaws. And if we want it to saturate a little bit faster, you could technically have a little bit of a lighter tamp as well. There's a couple different experiments that you can really mess around with that, and the only time that I really see a large difference on that tamp pressure.
Yeah, and I think those sorts of experiments too are easier to perform when you have a machine that has the ability to change your flow rate or control it a little bit more. And I think that's where flow control, for instance, on an E61 can be a very useful tool. So one thing to bear in mind is that on many of these machines, the way that pre-infusion works is simply that either the solenoid valve will open or the pump will run, and it's not necessarily changing the flow rate. But that's not the case with the Classic GT. The Classic GT is actually using a specific low flow of water for the pre-infusion, specifically for pre-infusion, as opposed to simply running the pump.
Exactly. So it's fully pre-saturating the entire puck.
Yes.
It's pre-wetting that entire puck.
Well, you can, right. If you
can.
continue just holding that button down, water, or coffee rather, is going to eventually begin to just flow from the portafilter.
And the specific settings for light, medium, dark, whatever it might be, is kind of intended of an estimate of how much water it would take to fully saturate that, to prevent a lot of jamming as well. Again, puck preparation is going to be huge there because it will release any kind of flaw that you have within that pre-wetting, so you might see some channeling. But a lot of what that does, it's kind of like, my analogy is kind of like concrete. So powdered concrete, kind of like pushing that through a tube or anything like that, you'll see lots of jams, and that kind of has to do with the size particles that we're looking at, the indexing of those things. They're hitting each other, they're causing that jam naturally, but if we were to fully wet all of that concrete, we can easily move through that tube. Just naturally how it's kind of meshing together. Again, we're thinking of densities at this point, and the porosity, and how those are then infusing and creating its own resistance within inside the puck.
Well, and that just makes me think of coffee itself with different densities and porosities just based on roast level or maybe even processing method.
So we're putting a lot of different things into account when it comes to this.
I mean, for me too, though, I think with the Classic GT in particular, at the end of the day, and this is going to be the case for pretty much any kind of preset anything that you have, you may not always find the perfect use case for it, which is where I think it's so brilliant that the machine just has the ability to completely manually control pre-infusion instead, which is sort of the ultimate equalizer, because not only can you actively pre-infuse for your desired amount of time, but also then passively allow for soak. And again, it's literally just, do you want to toggle it on or off for your regular brew setting, or by pressing and holding, that gets you manual access to that low flow, and then you simply just release and your soak starts. So to me, I think that that's really great, especially too on a machine like this one, where let's say that you wanted to go even lower in terms of flow, right, versus the low flow pre-infusion that we just saw. This is something that we can do on the Classic GT. It's also going to be something that I'll show you a little bit on like the Profitec Move. If we just press and hold and start, we can stop, and then you can still leave the group open if you wanted an even lighter, more gentle introduction of that water to the puck. So to me, that's actually something that this machine, I think maybe, it's not talked about enough, that you actually have another way of just going straight into that like purely passive if you don't want to use the machine for active pre-infusion there.
So there's basically any way that you want to fully saturate that puck.
Yeah. Got from Stefan, quick observation, the Elizabeth uses steam pressure around 3 bars for pre-infusion when the steam boiler is turned on, or pump for pre-infusion when the steam boiler is off. Yes, although Stefan, the one thing that I would note too though is that basically the pump did only run for a brief period of time, at which point with the solenoid valve still open, just the latent pressure inside the boiler is allowing the rest of that to drip out. So none of the steam boilers are turned on for us today though, because again, we were trying to avoid blowing a fuse, but no, that's definitely true. So the classic GT, honestly, like there's really nothing up here that's doing anything quite like it. So, if you want to know more about it, definitely check out our full review for it.
And we do have another video coming on the GT as well.
Yes. So Denbox Hero, I've been doing WDT plus distributor plus puck screen is what I've been doing for when pre-infusion. No pre-infusion, I add tamping in the prep.
Oh yeah, so that kind of just, it's more of the point there that there's almost no tamp needed, right? When you actually just pull the shot over it. It already has this natural resistance and equilibrium and pressure that it's pushing things to its point.
Yes. And I mean, it really comes down to, how you've prepped the puck, right? So that was something years ago when we first brought on the ASO leveler, right? It was like, hey, if you grind fine enough, you can just simply use the leveler. I mean, you tested it with me, and you can avoid tamping altogether. Like, I'm not saying that tamping like is done, that it's over. But there are other ways to prep pucks that don't necessarily involve like a complete tamp.
Exactly, because we're dealing with all these particles that are all different kinds of sizes, and they need to find all of these little spots to fit in. Now, without a little assistance on the pre-infusion, it won't find those natural little spots. It'll naturally find channeling. Now, if we just have full resistance, it will more than likely find those little spots right away.
Yes.
With that more than dense packed puck immediately.
Yeah. So let's move on now. We've got our first E61 machine of the bunch here. Is our GT plugged in over here?
It is.
I will power it off just to save this outlet. But this is our Profitec Jump. So this is going to be representative of a few machines. So there's the Jump, there's the Pro 400, which was its precursor. There's the ECM, it's the Mechanica 6, and then we also have the 6 Slim rather, and then the 6 Slim PID, right? So that's just referring to the little display here, and we have a 3-position temperature switch that's used actually to control pre-infusion. So I will use this machine to demo a few things, right? I'm going to demo how ECM and Profitec on this style of machine actually handle pre-infusion as a feature of the machine that has been designed for it. And then we can also take a look at just how an E61 machine, if you don't have flow control, if you don't have any other features, how you can still use it to actually allow water to flow into your group before you start extracting. So on this machine though, so I'll turn it off, and then Mark, get us as close to that little screen as you can. Give me a thumbs up if I need to move the machine.
No, you're good.
All right, perfect. So it's going to be tricky, but keep your eyes here because when you first power it on, this is one of the things that I like about the Jump and the Slim PID. You'll see P1 on, and then it'll also have Eco on. Oh, off, sorry, I turned it off so the machine wouldn't fall asleep on me. But that basically is just telling us that pre-infusion has been turned on. And so on this machine in particular, the way that pre-infusion works, and this is the same for the Mechanica and the Pro 400, is that when we raise the pump, we have 5 seconds of active pre-infusion followed by 3 seconds of passive. Now, if you're watching and you're wondering what that was, that's basically we have a little too much steam. It's a little too hot inside the heat exchange tube. Even on a machine that has any kind of PID regulation, if you have it sitting for a while, you will want to run a cooling flush because that's also going to affect our pre-infusion, as you can see, because there's more pressure that's allowing that water to be pushed out. So now, now that we've cooled things off, we're going to see a much gentler soaking phase, right? But that is the pump still running at a full pressure during this extraction. So it is a little bit different. It's just simply the pump running. Now, that's if you want to have pre-infusion turned on. There's another way that you can pre-infuse with pretty much any E61 machine, and I'll turn a little bit just to see if we can show it. It's going to be over here on the side. Yeah, there we go. That's perfect, Mark. So basically, I call this the hammer here at the top of the lever. The cool thing about E61 machines is obviously this is a switch that turns on the pump, but it's also a lever that opens our valve here too. And if you raise the valve without pressing the pump switch, there's still pressure and water in, there we go, yeah. There's pressure and water, I'll have you hold that, Zach, inside the boiler and inside the line that can flow out of the group. Now, this will be sort of inconsistent, obviously, because it's just based on the heating of the boiler and on pressure pushing that water through, but it's something that you can do if, again, you don't have flow control, maybe you have an older machine, maybe you don't have a pre-infusion setting on it, but you can run that and you can still begin to gently soak your coffee. So if you've got an older machine and you do want to try and experiment with maybe some lighter roast coffees or things like that, that's a way to do it. So Tate, refreshing to see an E61 machine with brushed stainless steel. Looks really cool. Mm-hmm. Yes, I do like now, so that's kind of like Profitec's sort of new visual identity. They are going more towards kind of a satin steel. They've got fewer of the really brightly, brilliantly polished machines. The Move, we've got black, and we've got a good amount to talk about on the Move too. I think it's a pretty cool machine. But, I think too, though, that is kind of like the Stone, right? It's a aesthetic choice. It's going to be something that some people really like, something that some people maybe aren't as into. But I do think that the jump and kind of the new shift from Profitec was originally, in my opinion, kind of a much more traditional, very kind of, just beautiful but kind of understated look. And now they are starting to jump into a little bit more kind of fun, more modern, youthful looks. And I think for those of you who have been keeping your eyes on the Move, eventually I'm sure we will have the multiple colors. So to match the goes and obviously the grinders that will follow. So.
Yeah, to kind of change with the change of modern kitchens and aesthetics. Mm-hmm. It's always changing, so it's good that they're keeping an eye out for that.
Mm-hmm. And that's where ECM, obviously, if you're really into the more premium luxury, super polished, perfect welds, perfect paneling, that's where you would go. So Charlotte, this is extremely hot. You hold it. Zack probably has barista hands. I have spreadsheet hands. So
yeah.
Who's to say? We'll move on now, though, to our Profitec Move.
Go ahead and switch.
Oh, we're going to switch? Okay.
Yeah, let's do a little swapperoo.
People are not getting tired of hearing me talk this whole time. So we're heating up, actually. And I'll tell you what, while this is still heating up, we'll move on to our Synchronica because we'll be able to continue our discussion of the E61 group and the flow control. And then we're actually going to get back to Celia's question as well, right? So you're asking about the best setting for pre-infusion on a Synchronica that's plumbed in. And so when it comes to the pre-infusion on the Synchronica, when it's plumbed in, that's actually something that you can do that's different from some of these other machines. It's called line pressure pre-infusion. So once upon a time, before we started putting flow controls on things, or you started putting, say, proportional valves inside machines to control the flow rate, or having externally adjustable OPVs or things like that, what you could do is you could obviously plumb your machine into a water line and then use the much lower water line pressure to pre-infuse your coffee, because it's the same concept where essentially we are, and let me just get this to stock for a moment. So we're going to do 1 1/4.
Which for most home machines, we always recommend a 2 to 3 bar inline pressure. Now, there are some commercial machines that you can go a little bit higher than that, but definitely not higher than 4. That would be a little rough.
And especially if you're using something like a BWT, an inline water filter, you'll already be reducing the pressure so that you don't harm the filtration membranes, at which point the water going to your coffee will be coming in at a much lower pressure. So if you're around maybe a 1.5 to say 2 bar, Zach, where would we be then for Stelia just in terms of let's say you've got your flow control on your machine.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that we want to just put it at stock for a minute. Line pressure pre-infusion, what would you suggest, Zach? And again, line pressure pre-infusion is we lift this brew lever like we did on the Profitec Jump there, and then just the flow of water to the boiler pushes the remainder of the water out of the group. That's what line pressure pre-infusion is.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, I would keep then my flow all the way open, so ensuring that we're not all the way closed, really utilizing all of my line pressure at that point. Since, I typically try to shoot for about 3 bar when it comes to pre-infusion or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's enough to really kind of saturate that puck, infuse the whole entire
So like
thing.
recipe-wise then for a medium roast, let's say we've got our Synchronica, where are we looking at temperature-wise, ratio-wise, and maybe even for like a pre-infusion followed by like a soak time?
Yeah, temperature-wise, I would start like 200, 201. Again, different volatiles are going to be coming off at different temperatures, so that's something that I like to initially try before going into pre-infusion. I would try something just at a stock flow rate, pull that at maybe a low temp, kind of understand the taste compounds that are attributed to that. Maybe at a higher temp too. I'd go as crazy as like 203, 204. Taste what you do or don't like about that. Maybe there's something that you really do like about that high temp extraction, and we just need to dial things back and maybe use pre-infusion to really get an adequate amount of these coffee solubles saturated at that high temp so they're actually extracting, and then the rest of your extraction is at that lower temp, so we don't go too crazy with all these other solubles. But some of those volatile compounds that are initially released at a higher temp might be released then.
Yes.
That's getting a little crazy of theory, but that's kind of how it works.
So what does active pre-infusion mean on the settings on the Synchronica 2? Yeah, so Stelia, so that's a good question. And so active pre-infusion means that the pump is actually running to pump water to the group, okay? So with the Synchronica, because you can plumb it, passive pre-infusion is going to work a little bit differently on this machine. Because the way that you start your shot is obviously you lift your lever. That means that if you have active pre-infusion turned off, but you have passive pre-infusion turned on, which you can do, you're simply letting the line pressure flood into the group, right? So active pre-infusion is more so if you don't have your machine plumbed in. So if you're not plumbed in and you want to get more flow of water to the group, you'll turn on active pre-infusion and then you can still let it rest, okay? So that's what that's going to do. When you have the water line in though, essentially as soon as you raise that lever, water is going to enter the group because there's pressure inside the machine coming from the water line that's going to start filling that up for you. So that's what active means. I would say that on your machine, if you are plumbed in, you can turn active pre-infusion off.
And another point too, just going back to a recipe for that pre-infusion too, it also depends on that your actual flow out. Like, are you saturating your whole puck to the point where you're actually extracting most of your solids to where you want? Because then I would, start using pre-infusion if you aren't, if you're getting a lot of bypassing. So it's all guided by taste. But for a medium roast, I'd say, start at that 3 bar for at least 8 seconds or 3 to 8 seconds, somewhere around there, experimenting, maybe some time off as well, letting it fully saturate and then go into your extraction. But we'll also be releasing a little bit more on that in a recent video as well.
Upcoming video.
Upcoming. There we go.
So we've got a couple other questions from RJ. So RJ, I think, is asking about like spring lever machines. So the truth is, I actually am not 100% sure. It is actually going to vary on models too. But so the two that I have personal experience with are the Betzera Strega and then the Profitec Pro 800. So the Strega has a fairly small boiler. It's more like a heat exchanger. And then the pump actually does run at a low pressure to pump water out of the heat exchanger into the lever group, and then the spring begins. And so I have not seen pressure reflected on a boiler pressure gauge from just that initial kind of flooding of the group. Now on the Pro 800, it's a very low pressure, but basically it's just using the vacuum that's created in the group when you pull the lever down and then the piston rises. You're creating negative pressure that's drawing water into the group from the boiler at a very low pressure, and then it's sitting directly above the coffee. Now, I don't know the specifics in terms of what that pressure is, but it's something that we could reach out to Profitec for. And then obviously you reach full extraction when you raise the lever back up. But it's generally, I would say, gentler than if you were going to, say, use like an active pump, right? As opposed to, so because it's flooding the group. But like I said, it is going to vary. And even between the two that I've used, the Strega and the Pro 800, it's going to be pretty different.
Yeah, and oftentimes those flow profiles are mimicked within a lot of pressure profiles. If you look at like the press sensor, you can see common lever machines, because this was our first
put
interaction.
A press sensor on one of those.
Yeah. So it's one of our common ideas of what pre-infusion was a long time ago. We were trying to understand, why are these shots so good on these lever-like machines as well? What is it doing within there, within these very interesting pressure profiles, why it extracts so well and so different.
The pressure from the spring obviously is declining as it's uncoiling, so you kind of have a smooth taper at the end.
Yep, yeah, it tapers.
So, Distant Horizon, I have a plumbed Bizarre Aria with flow control, been experimenting with many factors, you've been touching it. That's awesome, so that's, I think, if you really enjoy that stuff, like especially with flow control and plumbing in, is the way to go. Because
Definitely.
the line pressure pre-infusion, the flow control device too, gives you a lot of control. It is very manual, but it's something that's really where you feel, it's more like driving manual, like driving stick versus automatic, right? Like
you have a sports car, you want a manual, right?
Yes. So Kirk, can you briefly talk about how to pre-infuse on single boiler machines like the Gadget Classic and the Profitec Go? So we have touched on this in a few streams, but sort of the way that you would want to do it with them is basically you have water flowing straight down into your group, right? And the only other place that it can flow out of is going to be your steam wand, right? So if you open your steam valve at the same time that you're extracting and you're still in brew mode, that is going to cause the water to basically split into two different directions. And so some of it will come out of the steam wand, and then less of it, as a result, will come out of the brew group. Now, you can do that if you fully open the valve and try to direct as much water out of the steam wand as possible. I would not recommend stopping brewing, because at that point the solenoid valve will close and it would take any pressure that you've built up and relieve it into the tray. But you can leave the knob open up until you're ready to really start extracting, then close it all the way, close the steam valve all the way, and then you'll begin at full pressure essentially.
Yeah. I think pausing in between can cause a lot of issues with your puck.
Yeah.
So.
Well, basically because
it's corroded by then.
If there's vacuum, right, and then it can lift the puck after you've finished, because it's essentially relieving any of the pressure that's in there down into the tray. It can also relieve water too. Like obviously your puck is much drier than it would be if you didn't have your solenoid valve.
Yeah, so unseating it just slightly too will just create just straight bypass, because that's what it naturally kind of wants to do anyways, is that it would want to kind of bypass your puck. And we do as much as we can so it does not do that, but it's very highly likely it would happen in that circumstance.
I would think the pressure shown in the gauge from the boiler would be applied to the puck during pre-infusion on the Pro 800. So RJ, that's something I can look into. Like I said, off the top of my head, I don't have a answer to say definitively what the pressure gauge does read on there. So SCP, why do a lot of machines that have time-based pre-infusion open the three-way solenoid valve to atmosphere pressure after pre-wetting? This results in the pull out of the puck and more channeling risk. Open the three-way valve after pre-wetting. So you're saying leaving the valve open so that water can continue to flow out of the boiler and into the puck, is that? I'm guessing that's what you're asking. If you can clarify for me. And then Mike, discovered by accident, I made a shot with no visible channeling, getting my best tasting shots to date. High flow puck, 18 dose, paper plus metal filter on an E24. Here's my sequence after the light goes on. Are you using, so after the light goes on, are you using Mark's sequence then to get yourself those 200 degrees? I'd love to see that down in the comments. Steam valve half for 5 seconds, then steam valve full turn at 5 seconds, turn on steam, so you're raising the temperature just a little bit, turn off brew switch, so you're stopping, okay. Turn off steam, wait for the light to come on, close steam wand, then, okay, so you're really kind of going all out then, Mike, I'm sorry, in terms of, nope, all caps, okay, okay. Next time, space them all out to N. Oh. But no, that's pretty cool though. I mean, so that was we used to call that temperature surfing back in the day. I mean, it's still around, but it's basically what Mike's describing is using, obviously, steam mode in order to more actively heat the water, get it a little hotter. So, you know, that's kind of going back to what I was saying too, just with, you know, I think, who was it that said that about a distant horizon, you know, playing with the different extraction conditions on the Bizarre Aria, just really taking the equipment that you have and just going all out. What's happening in the physics there? Sorry, I mean after. And so as far as like the paper goes and the puck screen and everything too, I mean, what do you guys think? We talked a little bit about this the other day about using paper filters for espresso. I know on top you can definitely use it to help keep your shower clean and then also just help with water. But I think underneath, right, that's when I'm not sure. I feel like I like the body from the espresso, so I feel like brewing through paper.
I think it really depends on the coffee itself, whether or not it's going to be a paper that leaves any sort of papery taste. Most don't these days. I feel like they've been doing pretty good at that. It depends on if you're trying to go for clarity or if you want like a heavy sort of body, and then it also changes that initial resistance too. When you're saturating too, if you're not really tamping too much, you're focused on your puck preparation, you have some sort of filter. I feel like if you don't have a good distribution from your shower screen itself, it might more evenly start saturating your puck. As to where if you do have a really good distribution plate and shower screen, it won't matter as much. As we've done in testing before, like your overall TDS actually doesn't significantly change. Time changes relatively. Taste does change relatively. So I think it's up to a preference, really. I mean, I used to do it just to kind of keep my group head clean in between shots.
See, for me, I just want fewer things in the portafilter. So, like, the catharsis of knocking a puck out is so great, but then having to, like, take the puck screen out.
See, I'm fine with it. A little magnet,
I know
you're
well,
good.
The one from E&B Lab with the little magnet.
Yeah, with the little magnet,
that
that's
I
nice.
love. Ham radio, pen pals with Paul. So, newbie question. So, we actually touched on this a little bit earlier, Paul. So, basically, machines with thermal blocks, including many super automatics, do have automated pre-infusion. The pump runs for a little bit, followed by a pause. And so essentially all Gaggia super automatics have a pre-infusion that's built in. Some of them, like the Academia, for example, allow you to adjust and change pre-infusion. So like on the Academia, you can skip pre-infusion and the machine can just run the pump straight, or you can run it and then program in a saturation time or a soak time, essentially. So the thing to remember with a super auto too, though, especially like a Gaggia, for instance, max puck size is 11.5 grams. So if you're somewhere in like the middle strength-wise, you're around like 8 or 9 grams or so, it's a much smaller puck, right? So you're not going to pre-soak maybe as long as you could on some of these machines, but there's much less, I mean, it's a single shot essentially at that point, and it's very compact too. So I don't know if you've looked at those pucks and ever compared them to, you know, a puck from a portafilter, but they're pretty small. So the short answer to your question is yes, it does apply to super autos. How much you can play with it is really going to come down to the machine. Like in my personal experience, the Gaggia Academia with its variable pre-infusion plus the knob that you can actually adjust, which changes back pressure inside the brew group, that's the most control you're going to get on a super auto when it comes to actually affecting brewing in that particular way.
It's way ahead of its time.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, oh man. Now, I mean, I'm loving all these comments too, though. So.
Wait, I like this one though. Paper on top significantly changes the rate.
Well, we can't skip SCP films though.
I got really excited about your comment.
Water from the group head goes to the drip tray, creates under pressure. Yeah, so I'd have to know which machines in particular you're talking about, because like that's what you're addressing. SCP is specifically why I don't like to stop the pump on certain machines, because it does then open the valve to go down to the drip tray.
Yeah.
So, but typically, like, and you'll see even on like the classic GT here, the group remains pressurized, so it will, you know, it's kind of like that soda can pop when you first take it off. If you take it off when you're in the middle of that, because the pressure has still built up before it started extracting. So, because you're not penetrating through yet, so if you relieve it, there's a little bit of pressure that just, you know, some people call it a sneeze. I like to say it's like a soda can because it's a little bit more This is a little more fun analogy. Thanks, you guys are awesome. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. And so, yes.
Wait,
Zach.
we skipped my...
No, we're
Okay,
not
yeah,
skipping.
yeah, yeah.
We're going forward and then
Paper
backward
on
again.
top significantly changes the rate, pulls flow almost twice as fast. So I would have a couple questions on what the machine was too. The distance between your actual puck.
Distant Horizon's using the Bizarre Aria.
Oh, Bizarre Aria.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
gotcha. I mean, I would actually love to pull an Aria after this and do some testing myself on that. So
Yeah,
I found
you
with
know.
many machines, it didn't significantly change the rate that much, but I think it
We
really
have no
depends on that
repeats up
distribution.
here brand-wise, but we don't have a Bizarre, so I do feel that's a demerit on my behalf. So if that's good for your questions, guys, we talked a lot, so we're going to go back to the Synchronica real quick, and then we're going to get to the PropTech Move.
Oh yeah, I forgot we were still.
We're still
streaming
talking
on
about the
some stuff.
Synchronica. I mean, really, all I kind of want to get into with the Synchronica, just to sort of finish things off, because we did talk about active pre-infusion, we talked about passive pre-infusion, we talked about line pressure pre-infusion. There we go. Oh, there we go. Sorry, Mark. He was looking for the right shot. He's just like thinking, oh my God, Nick, get out of the way.
15 years and haven't learned.
That's well, I haven't been on the camera for 15 years, fortunately for everyone else. The way flow control works, though, essentially, right, is you're introducing an additional valve at the group, right? And so this is controlling after the water has passed through the OPV, reaching the group, how much do you want to let out? And so depending on the manufacturer, because that is going to vary. So
we have pre-infusion.
Yeah,
already
well,
on.
I was doing a little demo earlier, right? So it's...
So now we're in the flow.
Yeah, so you can see we have the pre-infusion on, but we have the valve completely closed. So we've got a nice flow. Sometimes it will group up. We can really seriously increase. There we go. You see I got a solid stream once my flow increased, and it's pretty hard to go back from that, actually, once you've hit that really high flow rate. But basically, flow control is going to give you the ability on a machine that doesn't, say, have line pressure pre-infusion or any other kind of pre-infusions, the ability to control that flow rate, right? And so across the board here, obviously the Classic is the one that's using a pump that's actually producing a lower flow rate for the extraction. The rest of the machines, though, with the exception of our Profitex, are essentially just using either a brief introduction of water from the pump at regular pressure, or they're mostly just allowing the solenoid valve to stay open to basically just allow water to drip through, right? And so that's where I think that with the flow control, you can really start to play a little bit more. And it is going to vary, though, right? Because on a machine with a vibration pump, for instance, the flow rates are going to be different than on a machine with a rotary pump. And so Mark has published, some graphs and his results on that, but really flow control is not necessarily going to be the same on a vibration pump machine versus a rotary pump machine, because the flow rates can be different. So we have about 8 minutes left, so we're going to talk about the Profitec Move, because I don't want to skip this machine, but I will just say, hope you all had a ton of fun at the SCA Persepolis. Yes, we did.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if we have anyone in the audience who went, but if you saw us there, we had a blast. As a reminder, paper above or below always increases flow rates. So talking about the Profitec Move. The Profitec Move is really cool because it's a little bit like the Lilith Elizabeth, but leveled up to an even higher extent, right? So what I mean by that is you have the ability on the Move actually to do both an active pre-infusion and a passive pre-infusion. So I've programmed it both ways, because just like the Lilith Elizabeth, you can program unique profiles for both our 1 and 2 extractions here. So the first one, I've actually programmed with a more lengthy active pre-infusion, which means that the pump is going to run for a longer time. And on the second one, I've essentially tried to have 0 active pre-infusion whatsoever and just rely on the pressure from inside the boiler. So if we press and hold on both our buttons here, and I'll see, oh good, I'm not in the way. You can go to brew settings, and on brew setting 1, so we're gonna do 5 seconds of active, 7 seconds of passive, and then 29.3 for my extraction. And so that's actually, unlike the Lilith where it's adding pre-infusion to your total time, this is separating it out. So this is gonna be 12 whole seconds before my 29.3. And then if we look at brew settings 2, I tried to go as fast as I could. So it's a 0.2 second active pre-infusion followed by a 16 second passive pre-infusion and then a total extraction of 25.3. So what that means is, again, going back to our extraction here, I press this button, and so we're getting 5 seconds of active, and then there's going to be our 7 seconds of passive where we just have water dripping out, and then we're starting up, right? So on the second one, however, you'll see pump ran for a second, and then basically we're in passive this entire time. See, Mark is nice and concise. He has beautiful B-roll, and I drag you through all of this esoteric coffee experimentation. So, you know, that's why I get to do the live streams.
Yep. He's clapping back there for us.
Distant Horizon, I've totally enjoyed this video. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the dialogue today. Well done. You know, you guys are part of that dialogue, and we really appreciate the comments and the questions. It's a blast being able to talk to myself, but more so, obviously, to talk to you guys.
Yeah, and it gives me more to think about, too. Like with the paper, I always compared that to pre-infusions, not just straight-up extraction. So maybe that's something else that I need to test, is just straight-up extraction at full pressure versus paper.
Pressure versus, I mean, and that could be maybe a stream in the future.
Yeah,
pressure
it definitely
versus
could
paper.
be.
So,
yeah.
And I haven't forgotten about you, RJ. I can take a look at your questions too about the Profitec Pro 800. So, yeah, what have we got coming up though? So, keep your eyes on our blog if you haven't. Our articles on the website. We are getting into the summer, so that means we've got some really delicious summer coffee cocktails, non-alcoholic. Maybe a few that are alcoholic, just to, you know, after a long day. But some really delicious stuff that we're working on, some great photos there. And we will be doing a live stream on some of those drinks next week. So keep your eyes peeled for that, because that's going to be a lot of fun. And then, yeah, I think we've got some more really exciting videos coming up soon.
Yeah, definitely. Stay tuned for some special guests as well that we'll be having on again. If you didn't tune in the last couple weeks, we've had some world champion Brewers Cup. Tiago, who was on the other week, actually performed last night at Worlds. It was last night. I set an alarm to it to watch U.S. Guatemala with Raul and Tiago.
He was keeping us company too at the SCA show, both Raul and Tiago.
Yep, so. Yeah, so awesome, great people. Finals, I believe, are today, technically. They're like 12 hours off. So definitely tune into that. Some awesome things if you're really into, you know, pour-over style brewing.
Absolutely. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us. You know, Mark too, thank you for running the cameras today. And if we need Profitec Move back in stock. So Real Mo, sometime around June, we should have our next wave of moves available.
Yep.
So,
mid-June.
Mid-June.
Yeah,
that's right. But I mean, coming soon too, Classic GT. So that may just be even more enticing. But thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.